A snowstorm howls outside a small diner. The camera zooms in through the frosted window. Everyone in that little town thought Maya Johnson was crazy that night, risking her job, her safety, and her future, all for a freezing old woman nobody knew. But what Maya didn't know was that the decision she made in that moment would change her life forever. Maya wrapping a thick blanket around a trembling elderly woman near the diner's heater. A manager storms in, yelling, "Maya, you can't bring homeless people in here. Do you want to get fired?" And right then Maya looked up, her lips trembling, but her voice steady. "Maybe fire me. I'm not throwing her out in this cold." Music swells dramatically as snow batters the windows. Freeze frame on Maya's determined face. You won't believe who that old woman really was. Stay tuned, this story will shock you. And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. Maya Johnson worked long nights at a roadside diner just outside Chicago. Her smile was warm, her service impeccable, but her paycheck barely covered rent. Every night, she told herself things would get better. It was mid-December, the coldest night of the year. Snow came down like white fire. The diner was almost empty. Just two truckers, a young couple, and Maya behind the counter humming softly to keep herself awake. Then the door burst open. An old woman, frail and covered in snow, stumbled in. Her coat was soaked through, her lips were blue. Old woman, Please, can I just sit for a bit? I'll pay you back somehow." Maya didn't hesitate. She rushed to her, guiding her to a booth and wrapping her in a blanket. She brought her hot coffee on the house. But not everyone was kind. Her manager, Frank Peterson, walked in moments later, grumbling about reports, inventory, and lazy staff. When he saw the old woman, his face hardened. "Frank, what is this? Maya, this is not a shelter. You can't just let random people in here. Do you want to get fired?" And right then Maya looked up, her lips trembling, but her voice steady. "Then fire me. I'm not throwing her out in this cold." A tense silence. The snowstorm howls outside. Maya takes off her apron slowly. "Then I go." She kneels beside the old woman, gently patting her hands as Frank storms out. And that's how Maya lost her job, the week before Christmas. But in her heart, she knew she'd done the right thing. By morning, the storm had cleared. The diner was closed, the manager furious, and Maya was out of work. Still, she didn't regret it. She brewed tea for the old woman, wrapped her coat tighter around her, and smiled softly. "Do you have somewhere to go?" The eyes glistened. "Old woman, I used to, but my family's gone now. You're the first person who's been kind to me in years." Maya offered to walk her home. But as they stepped outside, the woman stopped and looked at her with eyes that suddenly seemed far too clear, far too knowing. "Old woman, child, the kindness you've shown tonight won't go unrewarded." The old woman walks away slowly, disappearing around the corner. Maya didn't even ask her name. She just smiled and whispered, "Stay safe." But by afternoon, that smile would fade, replaced by pure disbelief. The next morning, Maya was job hunting online when a black luxury car pulled up outside her small apartment. Two men in suits stepped out. Knock on door. Maya opens it cautiously. Bodyguard, "Miss Johnson, Mr. Whitmore would like to see you." Maya froze. Mr. Whitmore, as in Richard Whitmore, the billionaire CEO of Whitmore Industries, one of the most influential men in the country. Heart-pounding, she followed them to a private estate on the city's edge. When she entered the mansion, her eyes widened. Sitting on the couch, dressed elegantly, was the same old woman from last night, only now she wasn't shivering in rags. She wore a white cashmere coat, diamonds at her wrist, and a radiant smile. Maya's mind spun. Who was she really? Then a tall man entered the room. Richard Whitmore himself, the billionaire CEO. He looked straight at Maya. "My mother told me what you did." Maya gasped, realizing the truth. The old woman was Eleanor Whitmore, his mother, one of the most influential philanthropists in the country, and the woman Maya had sheltered was the matriarch of an empire. Richard explained everything. His mother had slipped out of the mansion the night before, heartbroken and wanting to see how ordinary people lived. No one had recognized her, except Maya, who saw only a woman in need. Most people walked past her. You didn't. You showed her compassion when others turned away. He takes out a check, large enough to change her life. I'd like you to work for our foundation, Maya. We need people like you. People who see hearts, not titles. Tears filled her eyes. I don't know what to say. Eleanor, smiling. Say you'll keep being you. But just as Maya's life was changing forever, a security officer rushed in, whispering something in Richard's ear. His face fell. What do you mean it wasn't an accident? The joy drained from the room. The truth was coming. A secret about that snowstorm night that would shock everyone. The morning after the storm broke, the Whitmore estate looked as if nothing at all had disturbed its perfect world. Frost on the manicured hedges, sunlight sparking off stone columns. But inside, the air was not peaceful. A simple piece of news had arrived like a splinter beneath the skin. Eleanor's fall that night was not an accident. Richard Whitmore stared at the security chief's face and watched the man struggle for words. He had expected excuses, confusion, the kind of bureaucratic shrug that smoothed inconvenient facts away. Instead, Raymond Cole, a man who did not unnerve easily, said only, "We found traces of a sedative on her walking stick, sir. Small amount, hard to detect. We thought the storm and the cold explained the fall. We were wrong." The words landed harder than any physical blow. Richard's hands went cold. For a long moment, he could not say anything. He tasted the copper tang of fear that was not his own name in headlines, but a far older feeling, the sense that someone had tried to take what he loved. When he learned that the woman who'd sheltered Eleanor, the waitress named Maya Johnson, had been fired for the very compassion that saved her, something else uncoiled inside him. Shame. He had watched the clip his mother's aide recorded, watched Maya wrap the old woman in blankets as the manager shouted and the storm battered the diner. He had watched the courage in that small, stubborn face. And now he learned that courage had come with a price. Richard made the call then, not because it was what a CEO did, but because it was what a son owed his mother. He wanted Maya found, not to reward her, yet, but to ask her a single question. Did you notice anyone following Eleanor before she slipped out? Maya, until now, had been trying to stitch her life back together from the small splinters of hourly jobs and borrowed blankets. She had taken the offer Richard's mother had made, some quiet work at the Whitmore Foundation, because she believed in doing good work, not in upward mobility. She answered the call from a driver with a badge and drove to the estate with a nervousness she could not deny. Meeting the son of the woman she'd rescued was as strange as stepping into a different life. She told them everything she could remember, the way Eleanor shivered when she pushed open the diner door, the small limp Eleanor carried from an old injury, the way a man in a threadbare cap had paused outside the window and looked in before slipping away into the storm. Maya had noticed the man, but had assumed he was a passerby, someone scared like the rest of them. She had not seen a camera or a face-to-face threat, but it was only in the light of investigation that details gained weight. Detectives took notes. Raymond and a small Whitmore security team, quiet, efficient, started pulling footage from the diner, from the street cameras, from the route Eleanor had taken. They found the threadbare cap man in more frames than they initially believed. When they enhanced the image, the man's features sparked recognition among two security veterans who had seen his face before.
at industry boardrooms, and at closed auctions where deals turned hands from legal to very nearly criminal. "Victor Hale," Raymond said, and the name landed like an old bruise. Victor Hale was a name out of Richard's past, an old partner turned ghost in the corridors of Whitmore's company. Victor had been a friend in the early days, clever, persuasive, practical to a fault. Over the years, rumors had swirled. Offshore accounts, questionable contractors, deals smoothed with favors rather than paperwork. Richard had kept him close because Victor got things done. But closeness is not loyalty. Victor's climb had sometimes looked like a shadow climbing into a better light. Maya felt as if the room tilted. "Victor Hale?" she whispered. She had heard the name in her neighborhood whispers, men who did favors for men with money. She had never imagined his face carved into surveillance footage had anything to do with the woman she'd wrapped in blankets. Richard's jaw set. He had thought the danger was over the moment Eleanor was safe. He had not expected that protecting her would be the first domino in a longer line. If Victor was involved, the matter was not random cruelty. It was a boardroom war that had spilled into the streets, and his mother had either been a target or a pawn. They moved fast after that. A warrant here, an interview there. Fragile alliances appeared. A disgruntled contractor who'd been stiffed by Victor, a cashier who remembered a black sedan circling the diner, a former partner who had been cut out of a lucrative deal. Each piece built a map that led away from the storm and into the well-lit offices of companies that hid debts behind shell names. Still, the men behind the truth knew how to hide. Victor was cautious. His fingerprints were ghostly, but he made a mistake. He sent a message, one small electronic breadcrumb, to a fixer who had been promised a favor. The fixer slipped, and the breadcrumb led the detectives team to a rented storage unit where, under a false name, Victor had left a cache, a ledger with names, a small bottle with residue that matched the sedative, and a folder of documents that suggested a pattern of silencing and pressure. When Richard opened the folder, his face did not show triumph. Instead, something deeper uncoiled. The ledger named not only shell companies, but people. Employees who had resisted, contractors who had demanded invoices, even a small-town cafe owner who had asked too many questions. Victor's design for power was to push a little, then push harder, to break the ones who questioned and keep the silent prophets for himself. Maya sat across from Richard in his study that night as he shuffled the papers. The house was quieter than she had expected. No band of loyal executives, no ceremonial chest-beating. He looked tired, older. The papers in his hands were evidence, but the real weight in the room wasn't prosecution. It was accountability. "You saved my mother's life," he said finally. "And I did not save yours from being thrown into the street. For that, I am sorry." Maya's answer was simple. "I only did what I could." Richard folded the ledger closed. "We can put Victor away for this," he said, but he didn't say it like a man who expected applause. He said it like a man who had learned, very late, that wealth without morality is a house built on sand. They planned the next move together, quietly, carefully, a sting that would not let Victor get away with the ledger's disappearance. A public unmasking before he could call in favors. The idea was to bring the ledger into the light, to show not only Victor's crimes, but the enabling network that let a man poison a matriarch in a storm and assume the world would not notice. Maya had expected she'd return to a diner, or perhaps the shelter work she'd always loved, but instead she found herself in a strategy room, a small circle of honest people, a plan to expose what had been hidden. It was dangerous. It would require courage and cunning and a public face that would not flinch. And as they set the trap, the quietest voice in the room, Maya's, said something that steeled them all. If Victor falls, he won't be alone. He built this by buying silence. We have to name every hand that sold out the rest of us. Richard looked at her then in a way he had not before, not as a woman he rewarded, but as an ally he trusted. Then we do that. We name them all. They moved forward with one plan: lure Victor to finish what he thought was an untraceable takeover, and, when he arrived, bring every light of the world upon him. On the night they were ready, rain fell where the snow had once lain. The sting of cold was replaced by something harsher, the knowledge that a fight for truth had begun. Before dawn, Victor would walk into a place he thought safe. Before dawn, the ledger would be presented to cameras, to police, to every court that would hear it. But before the curtain rose, something arrived at Maya's door. A plain envelope. No returned address. Inside, a single line: "You should have left it in the storm." The line was a threat and a promise both. Maya's fingers tightened around the paper. Outside, the city slept unaware of the net that was being drawn, around one man, around a system. Inside, Maya and Richard prepared for the moment when the house of guarded money and ugly secrets might finally tumble.
The next evening, the Whitmore estate buzzed quietly beneath its polished calm. Outside, the rain whispered against the long windows, turning the city lights into blurred halos of gold. Inside, in a private study, Richard and Maya stood before the fire, not as Billionaire and Waitress, but as two people who had seen the same darkness from opposite ends of life. The note still sat on the desk, its words etched in dread. "You should have left it in the storm." Maya folded her arms, more to steady herself than for warmth. "He knows," she said. "Yes," Richard replied, his jaw tightening. "And that means he'll come sooner than we planned." Their sting had been carefully built, an elegant trap disguised as an olive branch. Victor Hale, believing Richard was seeking a private settlement, had agreed to meet that night at a charity gala. Cameras would already be rolling for the event. The press would be there, the board members too. If Victor slipped, even once, the truth would become public and irrevocable. But Maya didn't trust that a man like Victor would come alone. She wasn't wrong. That evening, the gala hall glowed with chandeliers and laughter. The city's elite floated through it all: pearls, cufflinks, champagne. It looked perfect, almost too perfect. And in that perfection, Richard Whitmore stood like a statue carved from regret, rehearsing every word he would say. When Victor arrived, the air shifted. He moved like someone born to belong anywhere. A tailored suit, eyes that smiled without warmth. His handshake was firm, his grin rehearsed. "Richard," he said smoothly, "I'm surprised you had the nerve to call me. Last time we spoke, I recall you threatening to have me arrested." "Funny," Richard said quietly. "You still showed up." Victor chuckled. "Businessmen don't hold grudges, my friend. We hold opportunities." The word opportunities tasted like poison. But Richard had his part to play. He motioned towards the VIP lounge, where cameras discreetly lined the walls, disguised as decor. Maya, dressed as one of the catering staff, slipped through the crowd unnoticed. Her earpiece whispered updates from Raymond, the security chief. "Target's mic is live, recording clear," Raymond said. Maya steadied a tray of champagne glasses. She wasn't supposed to speak, only to observe, but she couldn't take her eyes off Victor.
The same man who had tried to erase an old woman in a snowstorm was now sipping wine beneath golden lights, smiling for cameras he didn't yet know were watching. She felt her pulse tighten. Inside the lounge, Richard slid a folder across the glass table. "It's all here," he said. "Every transaction you buried, every company you used to funnel money from our projects. You underestimated how long I'd tolerate that." Victor's smile didn't waver. "If you had proof, Richard, you wouldn't be handing me champagne." Richard didn't blink. "You're right. But maybe I'm giving you one last chance to admit it." Victor leaned back. "You're bluffing." Silence. Then Richard said, "Maybe. But you remember Eleanor, don't you?" That name, Eleanor, shattered Victor's calm. His eyes flickered just once, and in that flicker, the cameras caught something priceless: guilt. "Careful, Richard," he murmured. "It'd be tragic if another accident happened. Storms have a funny way of hiding things." Richard's voice went low, steady. "Only this time, the storm is watching you." And that was the cue. From the shadows of the ballroom entrance, two plainclothes officers moved in, quiet, professional, unseen by the crowd. Raymond's voice came through the earpiece. "Copy that. Proceed." But before they could act, Maya noticed something the others didn't. A man near the exit, hand brushing his jacket pocket. Her instinct screamed. She stepped forward, nearly colliding with a guest, spilling champagne in the process. The noise drew Victor's eyes toward her, and for the first time, he saw her clearly. "Maya Johnson, you again, the waitress who thinks she's a hero." She froze, but her voice was calm. "Just someone who doesn't look away anymore." Victor smirked, but his composure was cracking. "You think anyone will believe a waitress over me? You'll vanish before dawn if you're lucky." Maya took a step closer. "You should have stayed hidden in your storm." Then came the shift. The man near the exit reached inside his jacket, too fast. Maya didn't think, she moved. The tray in her hand crashed against the man's wrist, and the gun he'd been concealing hit the marble floor with a deafening clang. Screams erupted across the hall. Security rushed forward. Cameras spun. Every head turned. In seconds, chaos became clarity, because the cameras were already live for the gala's charity broadcast. The feed didn't cut. It zoomed. And in the chaos, Richard stood, holding the ledger high. "This is the proof of every crime Victor Hale has tried to bury. You see this man? He tried to poison my mother to cover his thefts. He sent threats to the woman who saved her life, and he thought money could silence justice." The crowd gasped. The reporters realized the story unfolding was no longer about charity, but corruption. Victor turned pale. "You planned this?" "Yes," Richard said, "and you walked right into it." Police moved in. Victor was handcuffed on live television, his expression flipping from rage to disbelief. Cameras caught every second, and for once, the world saw not just another scandal, but the collapse of arrogance. Later that night, long after the guests had been escorted out and the press frenzy calmed, Maya sat in the Whitmore garden beneath the rain-soaked lights. Richard approached quietly, a man visibly changed. "Justice can be ugly," he said, sitting beside her. "But you made me remember. It's still worth fighting for." Maya smiled faintly. "You didn't need me to remind you, sir. You just needed someone to believe it again." He nodded, then looked towards the city skyline. "Victor will face trial, but something tells me this isn't over. Men like him leave ghosts behind." As if on cue, Raymond stepped out from the shadows, holding his phone. "Sir," he said carefully, "we traced the number that sent that note to Maya. It wasn't Victor's." Richard frowned. "Then whose?" Raymond hesitated. "Someone inside our company. One of your board members." The air went cold again. Richard turned to Maya, a grim understanding forming. "Looks like the storm's moving closer to home." Maya nodded slowly. "Then we'd better be ready for the next one." The camera of fate lingered on them, two unlikely allies staring into a city that gleamed like glass and danger. The sound of distant thunder rolled once more, promising that the storm, indeed, wasn't over.
The next morning, the city skyline glistened with fresh rain. News outlets buzzed nonstop. Victor Hale arrested. Whitmore Corporation exposes internal corruption. Everywhere, people replayed the clip of Maya tackling the armed man and Richard exposing Victor's crimes. In less than 24 hours, the waitress who once worked invisible shifts had become an overnight symbol of courage. But inside the Whitmore Tower, the air wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, calculated. The boardroom was filled with the quiet tension of people pretending to celebrate while hiding fear. Some congratulated Richard on saving the company's reputation. Others whispered about stocks, reputation, and control. Only a few knew the truth. The storm was still brewing. As the morning sun sliced through the skyscraper windows, Maya entered the boardroom. She shouldn't have been there, a waitress among billionaires, but Richard had insisted. "You've earned your place here," he told her earlier, "and I might need someone who sees what others overlook." Now, as she stood by the glass table, dressed in a simple navy dress, she caught the subtle glances from board members, polite smiles masking their discomfort. One of them, Charles Denton, an older man with cold, sharp eyes, leaned forward. "Richard," he began, "while last night's stunt certainly made headlines, it also exposed our company to enormous risk. The media attention, the scandal. We can't afford instability. Perhaps it's time to reconsider leadership." The sentence hung in the air like smoke. Richard raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting I step down?" Charles shrugged. "For the good of the shareholders, yes." Another board member nodded reluctantly. "It might stabilize the market faster." Maya felt her chest tighten. Something wasn't right. Their tone, their timing. "But Mr. Whitmore saved the company," she said softly. Charles gave her a thin smile. "And who are you, dear? His new PR advisor?" Before Richard could respond, Raymond entered the room with a folder in hand. His face was unreadable. "Sir, we traced that number, the one that threatened Maya." He placed the folder on the table. Every eye turned toward it. Richard's voice was calm. "Whose number was it?" Raymond's answer cracked the air like lightning. "Charles Denton." The room went silent. Charles froze, then laughed softly. "That's absurd. You can't—" Raymond opened the folder, revealing call logs, email transcripts, and security footage from the night Eleanor, Richard's mother, was hospitalized. It showed him entering her ward minutes before the medication switch that nearly killed her. Maya's breath caught. You were there." Charles's mask shattered. She was going to talk. She found out about the money Victor laundered through her clinic. If she had spoken, we'd all be finished. Victor was just too clumsy to keep quiet. Gasps rippled across the table. Richard stood slowly, fury restrained beneath a controlled exterior. "So you sent threats to the woman who saved her life and tried to finish what Victor couldn't?" Charles straightened, voice shaking now. "You think this company survives on kindness, Richard? You're a fool. People like her," he pointed at Maya, "don't belong in our world. They're expendable pawns in the game." The words cut through the room like ice. But Maya didn't flinch. She stepped closer, her voice calm but resolute. "Then maybe it's time someone changed the rules of your game." Security entered moments later. Charles Denton tried to push past them, shouting about legal rights and conspiracies, but the evidence was overwhelming.
As he was escorted out, cameras from the waiting press outside the boardroom caught every second. Within hours, the footage went viral. Again. Waitress helps expose second corrupt executive in Whitmore scandal. But this time, Maya wasn't just the brave woman who saved a billionaire's mother. She had become the face of something far larger: integrity in a world that worshipped power. Later that evening, Richard found Maya standing at the massive window overlooking the city. "Funny," she said softly, "how a storm can reveal what the sunlight hides." He smiled faintly. "You've got a gift for seeing truth, Maya. My mother would have liked you." Maya turned to him, her eyes warm but tired. "And you've got a gift for second chances, sir. Don't waste this one." Richard nodded. "I won't. I've already told the board. I'm stepping down." She frowned. "What? But you just cleared your name." He sighed. "That's exactly why I have to. The company needs rebuilding from the ground up, free of every shadow. And I need to do something better with what I've been given." Maya was silent, unsure how to respond. Richard smiled gently. "I want to start a foundation, one focused on ethics, education, and justice, and I want you to run it with me." Her eyes widened. "Me? You've done more for this company's integrity than any of us ever did." Tears filled her eyes, but she managed a trembling smile. "I'll do it." Weeks later, the Whitmore Foundation was born, and in its opening press conference, Maya Johnson stood beside Richard Whitmore, no longer a waitress, but a leader. As she stepped to the microphone, flash bulbs lit up like stars. "Sometimes," she began, voice steady, "we think power means control, but true power is courage. The courage to stand when everyone tells you to stay quiet. The courage to choose what's right when it costs you everything. Last month, I was invisible. Today, I stand here not because of money or fame, but because someone believed truth was worth the fight." Applause erupted. Reporters jotted furiously. And somewhere, in the back of the crowd, a familiar figure watched quietly. An elderly woman with kind eyes and a soft smile. Eleanor. Richard turned and saw her, relief and emotion washing over his face. She mouthed 2 words: "Thank you." After the event, as Maya walked alone through the lobby, Raymond approached her, his expression serious. "There's something you need to see," he said. He handed her an envelope, unmarked, sealed in wax. She frowned. "Where did this come from?" "It was left at the foundation's door this morning. No name." Maya opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A message typed in bold letters. "The storm isn't over. You saved one man, but the ones who control the clouds are watching." Attached was a photograph, grainy, black and white, showing a boardroom much larger than Whitmore's, filled with unfamiliar faces. And at the center of it, Victor Hale. Maya's hands trembled. "But he's in prison." Raymond looked grim. "Maybe not anymore."